listening to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro, the place to learn about new technology and technological advances before they become mainstream. This podcast is sponsored by Ingram Micro's Imagine Next. It's not about the destination. It's about going someplace you never thought possible. Go to imaginenext.ingrammicro.com to find out more. Let's get into it.
Welcome to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro. I'm your host, Keri Roberts, and my guest today is Mike Stachura, a senior distribution sales manager at LG Electronics. Welcome, Mike. Thanks for being here today.
Hi, Keri. Thanks so much for having me.
Before we get into your excitement to chat about the newest display technologies and the market trends, I read that the only thing that comes close to your excitement for this is your love of iced tea. I also love iced tea. I loved reading this. So we got to know, what is your favorite iced tea? And is there one you'd recommend people enjoy having while listening to this podcast?
What a great question. Right now I'm having a Bigelow iced tea, but I keep a 2.5 gallon jug in my fridge at any given moment. And it used to be just traditional Lipton caffeinated tea. And then by like 9 o'clock at night, I'd be laying in, 9, 10 o'clock at night, laying in bed and just wide awake, bug-eyed. And my wife was like, hey, maybe you should switch to decaf. So highly recommend decaf tea and consuming it to get your 2 gallons in every day that we need.
I love it. It's so good. I love really good tea. I just found a place by me, and it makes such a difference when you have the right one on a warm day. It's wonderful to have. So, of course, a big trend right now is health protocol solutions, which is a fancy way of saying staying healthy. And staying healthy isn't just about enjoying the things you love, like you just mentioned iced tea, but it's also about how organizations communicate their reopening procedures when things are changing so quickly right now. So why is relaying information to employees and customers so critical, especially when these health protocol messages are changing almost at any moment?
Yeah, and you mentioned enjoying things you love and the mixture of safety in there. And I always like stories. So a really good example, we have a local pizza place here and really small lobby area, no signage, parking lot, tiny, way too small for it. And when everything first started happening with lockdown and everything, they had a little 8.5 by 11 piece of paper on the window that said 3 guests allowed in the lobby at any time. Nowhere of where to sign up, nowhere of where does the line start, how many folks are in there. So when we start talking about digital signage, it allows for that content to change rapidly. How many guests are actually in that lobby? If there's 3 in there, how many are, where does the line actually start? So using digital signage to help convey and let the public know what's changing within your establishment. So from a retail standpoint, informing your customers of where to be, when to be there. But then with store hours, a lot of changes throughout the U.S. right now, and we see things in different counties, different towns having different procedures. So this way, if we think of like a gym, now you can have that gym say, "Hey, we're expecting our next update on such and such date from our governor or whoever may be instituting the policies." But then also update store hours. So if maybe this week it's 8 to 5, but next week it's going to go to 8 to 10, perfect. Getting that communication out is key, and having that on a display, easy to update. You're not wasting all that paper. You can just go on your computer, update, you're good to go.
Yeah, and as you're mentioning, there's been a lot more increase in IT spend in the retail space to prevent germs, make things easier and faster, obviously keep people safe is the priority. Are there any other reasons you're seeing it come from multiple areas of a business like HR, public safety, and so forth, before when it was coming more from like an IT team?
Absolutely. So with any corporation, retail establishment, any really public-facing venue as well, that shift in spend, we're now seeing HR dictate more of what technology needs to be used, because they're the ones that are really fronting the adoption of the policies to be safe. So it may not be a traditional, hey, is this going to work on our network? It's, we need this technology to reopen, and we need everyone to be safe. So if we think of a corporation, how can we inform our employees internally of what to do, where to stand? Is there a new guideline for using the break room? Having digital signage throughout the campus is a great way to inform the community and that corporate culture of what employees need to know. So with all the changes that we're seeing from there, all the new openings, using that digital signage, change that content for your audience. One of my favorite topics of discussion is content versus context. And this has been one of those cases where content is king, making sure that you have that right message to your right people.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I know I've seen a lot of places, like you said, have kind of printed posters and they put them up a few months ago and things have changed. Are there any other differences as to why having something printed versus digital, why it might be important to have a more digital presence?
Yeah, so digital signage in and of itself is a great technology. Anytime there's a digital sign, you have a 3x longer dwell time or viewership of that message. So if you think of in your office right now, what does your cork board say next to your water cooler? It's got, various messages there. How many of your employees could rattle off everything that's listed on there? What are all the benefits you're right as an employee, things like that. Whereas with digital signage, you're going to constantly have that rotating. You're going to have that image that is going to be absorbed by the viewer better than static signage. So really powerful medium to communicate that.
Yeah, I remember working in an establishment years ago, obviously before COVID, and they had first transitioned to digital signage, and people were kind of hesitant, like, why do we need that? What's going on? And I would see people sit there and watch because we'd have fun content on there. You'd have informative stuff. It was changing all the time. And it actually drew people in a really interesting way. So how have you seen retail, you talked about some of the concerns you've had or issues places have had, but have you seen retail been making the push to add more digital displays? And how are you seeing them do this really well?
Yeah, so we talked about it earlier with some of the smaller type retail establishments, just general information of line starts here, what are our new store hours. But on some of your larger retail, your national accounts, you're actually seeing people counters that will say, hey, our maximum occupancy is 100 people right now. And currently there are 86 in the store. Come on in. So now you can have that display just trigger anytime someone walks into the store and walks out of the store, what that people count is. So you're able to maintain that social distance, which is key right now.
Yeah. And another option you would suggest is, instead of having a person standing outside, having to do the digital thermometer, which we see a lot now, you can now kind of use the digital thermometer and screen people coming in. How do these two kind of work together?
Yeah, and one of the so LG is really just the display, and it's the sort of visual part of the whole solution, but where the magic is that software and the technology behind it to automate that. That's where LG's really partnered with Ingram for a lot of these content management systems and the automation that goes in behind the scenes. So if you think when you walk into your establishment now, you likely either have someone there holding a temperature, one of the temperature scanners that they're scanning your face and say, yep, you're okay to enter. Now that individual can also be done with a digital display. So you can install a kiosk with like a thermometer or a camera right on top that just reads the surface temperature. It doesn't need to diagnose the individual of having a fever, just register if there is a possible threat. Then the CMS partners, the content management systems, this is where the magic happens because now you can start automating a lot of different things. So think of, all right, I see this individual just walked in, their surface temperature is 103. Okay, so we should have some cautionary procedures that take place. Maybe change the digital signage in the window that says, hey, please wait just a minute, don't enter, something along those lines. Now you can also have that kiosk dial into someone in, say, HR, or if there's a security team that's in place, dial in and just let them take sort of next steps. Maybe pull the person aside for additional testing or say, please work from home the rest of the day, something along those lines. And you can actually take that too and have that CMS tie into maybe the person's badge. So they walk up, they scan their badge at that kiosk, senses their temperatures, off, but then actually lock them out of the facility so they can't enter. So you can actually tie into like their badge as well. So really, really powerful systems that are going in place right now, which is just absolutely great.
That's incredible. Is that using like AI technology or are those things being done manually or is it the software? How is that working?
Yeah, a little bit of that AI technology where you're using the camera to sense that temperature and then shifting it to sort of if this, then that type procedures. So maybe having a virtual directory that says, I'm this individual, here's my guest pass. It sees my guest pass and says, I know that individual has an appointment with so-and-so. They walk up to the scanner, they get scanned for their temperature, and it just routes that call, or it immediately dials the individual that they're to see. So it's not sort of wandering around a campus, anything like that. So
are there any companies or businesses that are using this right now? I mean, are we seeing it a lot in office culture? Are we seeing it in healthcare? Where have you been seeing it most?
Yeah, healthcare has been huge. A lot of retail, but then believe it or not, your government and any facilities tied to that. We have one opportunity that we just installed within a jail. It was a jail / sort of judge office or courthouse type area. So when anyone walks in, you don't have to get physically close to an individual. You can have just a kiosk there that can do all the scanning and all the testing right there. So it adds that additional element of safety. So really any time that people are gathering, and that's a very broad statement, but that's really the idea as well, is it's whenever people are there, we all have to be safe in any context, because we know if there's an infection, it can easily spread to 4, 8, 10 people. So we can maintain that social distance, scan that 1-to-1 ratio. So
this could even be used in schools, or when the world is more comfortable to do concerts or sporting events, where this could become a normal thing and kind of prevent disease or prevent issues from happening, right?
Absolutely. And it scales depending on the application as well. So if we think of a concert venue, you may have a massive line of people waiting, and you can have certain cameras that will actually read multiple people at the same time. So you're able to manage that flow a lot better and keep the traffic sort of moving. So looking forward to when we can finally do concerts again, but
yes, no, this is fascinating. I mean, I wasn't aware of this. And of course, LG has a variety of solutions for these kind of indoor high brightness window facing digital signage. And you talked about how you work with Ingram and you have different softwares that go off of it. Can you share with us the type of options that are available that you offer for somebody that's listening and interested?
Yeah, so really the two main technologies that I want to touch on are a high bright window facing display. And these are displays that are landscape, portrait capable, 24/7 rated, and they actually have a higher brightness than your traditional display. So if you have the outside of your window maybe has a tint, it's something that you could just install on a cart, roll up to the window, and the display is bright enough that it can be read from outside. So really a totally different technology than your traditional display. And these displays have system on chip, it's called, and it's basically all the processing power you need to work with a CMS built right into the display. So very powerful. You don't need a lot of extra components. Very easy. You can just roll it up to a window and there you go. You're all set. You don't need any major installation. You're not trying to mount it to glass or anything crazy like that. So really neat from that application. Then as we move sort of inside, you may have different needs based on the application. So if we think of like an airport or maybe a distribution center, those displays are going to be in a little more aggressive of an environment. You may have more dust in the air. So these panels actually have what's called conformal coating. And that's basically just a layer of protection that they put over the motherboards to prevent corrosion. So this is how we get this 24/7 rated panel, 3-year on-site warranty. But in that application, you may not need that high brightness, but you need the mission critical 24/7 rated display. You have to constantly be updating your employees on that information. You can't have any downtime. So really those two kind of technologies, that high bright and then your IP rated internal displays.
Now, when you think of technology as a whole, whether it pertains to kind of what we're talking about specifically here or in general, where do you see it going within the next year?
Automation. More and more and more automation is going to happen. I think the technology that's out there for people counting and people tracking is really driving technology in the future. If we think of when a sports game lets out and you have that mass flood of people that's leaving the arena or the stadium, now you can track how many people are actually waiting to cross the street. Now, from a smart city standpoint, you can trigger that flow so those individuals are to walk away a lot easier. But then we think of retail as well. I mentioned that ability to track how many people are in your store. It's just all that information that we're able to gather. And I think the second screen phenomenon where we all have phones now is huge. You're going to be able to use that technology, not to track an individual, but to track the presence of someone. And I think that's just a very powerful message. And we're going to see a lot of adoption for that automation piece. Then, of course, in the home, IoT and smart home is such a fun little thing right now. When you leave the house, your garage door automatically closes, stuff like that. But it's seeing that more in the business side now too, where if a conference room is booked from 10 to 11, well, let's just turn on the heating and air conditioning in that room from 10 to 11. Then when people walk away, it knows no one else is in the room now. It doesn't necessarily need to cool that. So now you start talking about more energy efficiency as well. So I just love automation. I love that AI kind of smart home, smart business type of play. And I think that's going to be huge over the next 12, 24 months.
You are so excited about so many things. If people want to learn more about anything we talked about, whether it's the LG screens, about some of this automation, or even your insight on iced tea, where can they connect with you to ask questions?
Yeah, so I would say first, we mentioned how rapidly the technology is changing. So LG has a wonderful landing page and all the different health protocol solutions that are out there where we talk about the technology, but then you can drive down to the specific SKU level. So we know exactly what models and what we're trying to accomplish and spec in the right solution. Me personally, you can find me on LinkedIn, Mike Stachura, and then also on Twitter at Mike on Display.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Mike. It's so wonderful to have you on and really share. You can feel your passion for what you do and the excitement of great things to come. So thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Keri. Really appreciate it.
If you like this episode or have a question, join the discussion on Twitter at Ingram TechSoul with the hashtag B2B Tech Talk. Thank you for tuning in and subscribing to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro.
You've been listening to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro, hosted by Keri Roberts. This episode was sponsored by Ingram Micro's Imagine Next. B2B Tech Talk is a joint production with Sweetfish Media and Ingram Micro. Ingram Micro production handled by Laura Burton and Christine Fan. To not miss an episode, subscribe today on your favorite podcast platform.